Okay. Hi, Judiann.
Hi, Sue.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yes. Okay, so Judiann, you are a consultant. You help culinary brands, restaurants, and so forth with their marketing and visual branding. And I mean, actually, you do so much. I don't even want to try to summarize it. So I thought I would let you maybe just give a little background about yourself and how you got um, into doing what you do now.
Absolutely. Usually most people only know me they know me from the one angle in which they interact with me. And so that they usually think that's all that I do. Or they think, I don't know, it's confusing because if it's, you're not alone because my whole family doesn't know what I do. And I try to explain it and it's difficult. And so that's part of the reason why I don't have a website, because most of my work comes from referrals. But I am a trained marketer. So I worked in all marketing disciplines. Marketing is very broad. Obviously there's brand marketing, there's communications, there's PR, there's social media. I do all of that. And I've done it to very extensive in companies as marketing directors. As a consultant, I usually come in and I work with a team. It's usually because they don't have a marketing director with a breadth of experience. And so I will direct their team to execute it. Or I'll just come in and do a per project as somebody's working on a project, help them do a product launch or help them do PR or social media. And then, because of the public facing aspect of social media, a lot of people think that's what I do, but it's really, social media is my hobby. It's really fun for me. I don't really think of it as work, but I do sometimes get paid for things that I do with social stuff.
Yes, yes. And maybe we'll go a little bit further back because I'm hoping you could talk about your experience. And you went to college, you went to culinary school as well. And I know you have some ideas about that, but I thought maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing with us what that was like going to culinary school. And then maybe also, because you pointed out to me when we talked about this earlier, that there's so many things you can do with a culinary education, not just work in a restaurant necessarily. You had a ton of really good information to share with me. So I was hoping you could talk about that a little bit.
Right. When I had always loved food from a very young age and was kind of obsessed with food, but I never thought of it as a career because in my experience, at that time I wasn't into fine dining and it was just like there was restaurants obviously. And, I love baking and specifically like desserts and stuff. But, my experience of that was like the Safeway baker, things like that just didn't seem like something I wanted to do. And my parents had worked so hard to get our family to come to this country and be educated and all these kinds of things. And so I didn't want to disappoint them by choosing a culinary career because for them, it felt like a step backwards, because, washing dishes is what they're thinking. And so, as much as I enjoyed it for my pastime, I didn't choose it as a career. But then I moved to New York City and I worked in various fields in marketing at companies. But it came to a point where I was really like, the whole find your bliss, Joseph Campbell, find your bliss, find the thing that makes you happy. And it was always food made me happy. And I didn't know at that time what I should do in food. But I know I was living in New York City at that time and being exposed to really great, this is my cat here. This is what I talk about. No one cares until I'm on a call and then they're like, hello, I want to be on camera.
We love it.
Yeah. So I did, I thought the only way to work in food was to go to culinary school because I thought, well, you must know, like if you want to be a doctor, you got to go to medical school, right? No one's going to take you seriously. So, and having not known very many people who worked in the industry, that just made sense to me. Like if you want to do something as a career, you have to have a certain level of expertise. And so I looked into it and the French Culinary Institute, which was what it was called at that time, was right there. And I signed up. It was a very expensive program and it doesn't exist now. It became the International Culinary Institute. And then it's morphed into this other school. This two schools have come together. But at that time, it was the school. There was the CIA, which in upstate New York, which is kind of like a 4-year college. And so it attracted a lot of young kids right out of high school who wanted to establish a career. And the difference between the FCI, where I'm a graduate, was it usually I would say the average graduate already had a bachelor's degree in something else. They were career changers because they didn't want to go 4 years of culinary school. Basically, they had a degree, they'd studied everything, but they just wanted to be really good at this one thing so that you can go in and get a diploma in culinary arts, pastry arts, bread, whatever your discipline was. And it was a fast track program. And you go every day, and it's a full day, and it's very intensive. And it's a wonderful program, amazing set of deans, like Jacques Pepin was a dean,
Ooh.
Andre Soltner is dean. I mean, it's basically the who's who of French chefs, all there, all deans, and like the best. Ron Ben Israel, who does like all the best celebrity cakes, he's dean of pastry. And what a wonderful experience it was to go. And I went, and I think other famous graduates are like, that's where David Chang went to school.
Oh.
Dan Barber from Blue Hill, he went there. Bobby Flay, Christina Tossi. These are all like, they have their who's who of the graduates. They all went, it's a great school. Anyway, such a fond experience. Went to culinary school, loved it. And then the natural thing is the traditional track is you do to school and then you go work in restaurants. So that's what I did. Because, again, I didn't know. I worked in restaurants, and it was a really wonderful experience. Worked in a lot of really high end, like when you see like the Gordon Ramsay yelling at chefs and stuff like that on TV, and people think, was it like that when you were in culinary school? I'm like, no, actually better the kitchen, the more professional the staff. And it's very quiet. Nobody's yelling. There's like very soft music playing. That's all yes chef, no chef, very respectful. And all that kind of temper tantrum stuff. That's usually like at lower level kitchens, I should say. Like,
okay.
I mean, not to say that Gordon Ramsay is not that kind of caliber of chef, but like that type of behavior, because you're dealing with restaurants that are the clientele, and it's a business, and so they want to run it profitably, and so that requires people to be responsible and respectful and do their jobs.
That makes sense.
Well, so I did that, and then it was like, it's a hard life working in restaurants. It's a wonderful life, and some people are perfect for it, but I always kind of knew in the beginning that it wasn't my end goal. But I felt like I needed to at least reach an executive level where I can develop the menu and I can have my point of view before I did anything else. I don't really think that's the case, but that's my naivety, thinking I need to be an executive chef before I can do anything else in food. So that's what I did. And I worked really hard for that. And then 9/11 happened. 9/11 happened, and all restaurants closed, and it became this big deal. And this was after I had cooked in the James Beard House, and after I'd been in several publications, and I'd cooked on TV as like a pastry chef mostly. But when restaurants closed, it was kind of like a perfect opportunity to change careers a little bit. And I've been invited to write for a few magazines, and my background is writing. I studied literature and creative writing in college, so writing was naturally easy for me. And to write about food was even easier because everybody writes best what they know. So if you're into sports, you could be a great sports writer. Like I could never write about sports, but I could write about food. And because I had that background on the culinary side, it was very easy for me to talk to chefs, talk to restaurants, like talk about ingredients, because you can prompt them. You can when they left out ingredients, you'd be like, well, what about that? And they'll be like, oh yeah, So it actually made for better writing, just knowing the topic so well. And then it just morphed, and I ended up being recruited back to work at the French Culinary Institute in their marketing department. It was at the time where pastry chefs it was like the celebrity chef time. So everybody wanted to go to culinary school. Everybody wanted to be this is like when Food Network was happening. Everybody wanted to be on food TV. And so it was very popular to go to culinary school at the time, very profitable. And so I did the marketing that would recruit the people and convince them that they, should go to culinary school and have these dreams and things like that. So
neat. Well, wouldn't you say that it's still very desirable for a chef to want to sort of be on TV, and chefs are held in much higher public regard than they were maybe like 50, 60 years ago?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and it kind of depends on what your motivations are. Now, there are people who are very happy to just be a chef for a restaurant group or be a chef at a restaurant and do their menu, and they have no desire to be recognized or have their name in print and be that kind of person too. But it's like, any other industry where if you as a chef, as a talent, you become a brand to some extent. You represent a certain style of cuisine. It's like having a cookbook. Like a cookbook doesn't make any real money, but a cookbook is an opportunity to brand yourself and to get yourself out there and to be able to promote yourself and what you do. And so this is very important if you wanted to open up, say, multiple restaurants and you're trying to get a restaurant deal in another city, or or you need investors. Well, they're going to want somebody who is like an A-list, or at least somebody that people recognize. It's just like being a celebrity. You're trying to get a big Miramax film deal. You've only been in independent films. You might want to do that Superman when the offer comes, because at least you have that on your resume, and then people know who you are, and then you can go back to working on your independent films.
Exactly.
It's a little bit like that.
Exactly. Or if you know what you want to do, you can maybe look out to be, an assistant or an intern in that specific area, or for that specific, person, because it will get you some experience.
Absolutely.
And
there's so many areas in the culinary field that people don't immediately think of too. One of the things I did was when I worked at the French Culinary Institute, I talked to a lot of prospective students who were a little bit like me, where they weren't sure what they were going to do, and they're trying to understand the value of going to, a culinary program, spending the money, investing that time. And I honestly feel like it was expensive, but a totally worthwhile value, because I work in the industry now, I'm surrounded by food people left and right. There's a certain level of respect that I can get when I do projects and stuff like that amongst my peers who are in the food industry and other chefs and people like that, because it's just having a certain level of expertise in the topic in which you're supposed to be an expert in. Right. How do you say you're an expert? Just because you love something doesn't make you an expert. And, having studied it and not studied, right. Well, I know you were like a hamburger lover, but did you go to Hamburger University?
I did not, I did not.
But you have credibility because you have eaten so many hamburgers, right?
That's true.
So that's kind of the thing. It's like, when I do, I do consulting on flavor trends, for example, or restaurant trends or things like that. Unless you go out and eat at a ton of different places, not just in your hometown, but all over the country and all over the world, you're not able to really see a global trend or a national trend unless you've had that exposure. So if you're looking at, like, for example, just how people present their menus and stuff like that, you have got to look at a lot of different menus to notice that there's a trend going on. Mm-hmm. And so they're looking for people who are, well-versed in their topic, but also are able to back it up through their lifestyle and what they actually do when they're not on project,
Yeah, totally. And that brings me to another thing that we discussed, which is the importance of having sort of a visual business card, your Instagram profile. Can you talk briefly about, when you look at somebody's Instagram profile, right, what are you looking for? And then also, what do you see maybe that some other people don't see?
Right. I love Instagram. I use it as my personal Rolodex. It's how I remember people these days. You meet so many people, and sometimes you may never even meet people in person, but you have to remember them, and you want to, and you can give your business to anybody, but if you have some sort of connection to them, you're more likely to keep them in mind, top of mind. Just, you recognize that they're a good person, like a good egg. You want to give them work, things like that. So I feel like Instagram, use it, think about it like your portfolio beyond just a resume, which is just, the stats, the data, the LinkedIn. It's just, the nuts and bolts that, but they know you're qualified at that point, but do they want to give you the project, or do they want to give you the job or the assignment? Because you're hiring the whole person, not just their qualifications and experience. Mm-hmm. So this is your chance in a very informal way to showcase who you are as a person in addition to your qualifications. And so I use it as a vetting tool. I vet people whenever I don't use, that's not the only criteria, but I almost always look up somebody prior to doing a project with them, just to see if they're on Instagram. And then it's just nice because you can see, they like to travel. We have similarities. They like this, or, they love to bake too, or they're way into bread, these kind of things. You have this automatic connection. Obviously it's a public page. My page is public, but if it was that private, they shouldn't put it on there anyway. So they expect people to see it, which is totally fine. But I say, know that people are going to look at your page. So make sure that you put on your page the things that represent you. So if you are a chef and you cook, it's totally fine to post food that you make at home, which is really nice to show that, some chefs never cook at home. And you're like, you're hiring them for a project that involves like, cooking at home. Well, you want to see that they actually cook at home too. So showcase the work, but just know, like, clean up that plate, wipe the sides, just don't just throw it out there. Find the pretty light, and don't just document everything. Like, it's a curated page. Everyone thinks that Instagram it's not a documentation of your life. It's a curated documentation, and it's very visual, and food is very visual. So and you don't have to always have your own pictures too. I think for people in the culinary field, a lot of chefs are expected to be able to do everything, take pictures of their food and write about their food and write their perfect recipes. It's like, their talent is making beautiful food. Now, if they can take beautiful photos of their food, even better, but they shouldn't be expected to do that. But they should recognize that if that's really not their forte, to either, work with somebody, ask somebody if they, if someone's taking beautiful pictures of the food, if they can post it on their page with photo credit, or if they can hire a photographer to document their work so that they can showcase it. Because, they want to, it's like an artist. It's your portfolio. You want to showcase the best of what your abilities are. And, and not just the food, but like maybe if you're cooking at events and things like that, to just show that you're out there and doing things. And, even when you're networking with other chefs, that you're with the chefs that people care about. You're not just your solo self and you never go out, you actually don't know any other chefs. Like, it's like any other industry. Are you in the field? Do people know you? Are you liked? Are you well liked? That kind of thing.
Exactly.
So show it on your page.
Yeah, show it.
And make it easy for people to contact you too. There's always DM, which is, I think, totally appropriate way of communicating via DM. But if you're a professional and you're soliciting business or projects or work or anything like that, include your work email. Make it easy for people to find you, not just on Instagram, but in anything. I think I gave a commencement speech once, and in addition to like the grandiose, life lessons I had to share, I was like, okay, just make it easy for people to hire you. Like, on your auto signature, put your phone number, put your email. Like, don't make it hard for people to dig up. Where's that resume? Exactly. Make it easy to find you and be on all the platforms. And if they Google you, like, Google yourself every now and then, make sure like you like yourself at what's out there. Cause that's what they'll Google to find people that, they'll hear of somebody say, oh, so-and-so does such and such. They're great. Well, if the contact information is not readily available, they'll Google, and everything there is public information, and you should be aware of that, and then make it easy for people to find you, to reach out to you.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, that's one of my pet peeves. There are a few places where I live that they don't necessarily always like update their business hours, or, I'll drive down there and they'll be closed, but, on all their pages, it says they're open these certain hours. So anyway, I definitely agree with you. That's good advice. Now, Speaking about photography, I know that you've hired lots of photographers to help you, achieve your goals, working with clients and your clients' goals. But you're also a very good photographer yourself. And I know that, well, you're also married, or your partner is like a world-class photographer. And you are photographing though with your phone, right?
Yeah. So, and I would say any picture that I'm taking, which is most of my page, unless there's a photo credit from somebody else. And the only other person I would ever post on my page that I have posted is my husband's photography. And I always give him photo credit. And usually, and because, he wants it. He requires photo credit. But I also, I'm showcasing his work. And the only reason why I'm showcasing his work is because I hired him for a project, or either I'm in the photo, or my children are in the photo, or it's a project that I'm somehow involved in. I'm not just posting his photos for no reason. But yeah, he is a master photographer. He's won tons of awards. He's probably one of the best when it comes to commercial photography, and he happens to live here. But like, he's no help to me, because unless I hire him for a project, he's not taking my photos. He'll watch me with my iPhone. It won't offer any pointers.
Well, you seem to be doing okay on your own. I wonder if you could share some tips, like not only in taking photographs of food, but also maybe you edit your photos. And so maybe there's some editing tips you have, and then just also for sharing. So those are 3 things. And if you don't hit them all, I'll remind you, but I'm just starting out with taking the picture.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people get hung up on the equipment too. So they, I get a lot of questions. What kind of phone do you have, or what kind of camera do you have? All this kind of stuff. If you seriously, if you're into photography, it's worth investing in a camera because it's a great tool and you can do so many things with, a professional camera. But the tool shouldn't limit you in your ability to take beautiful photos, because most people have a phone already. And unless your phone is really ancient, anything that's, in the last few years is a good phone, and it's worth investing. I always say, like, after a few years, just upgrade to the next phone, because the thing I notice the most is the camera. The camera quality will change after a few series. But yeah, you can take beautiful high resolution photos that can be blown up to a poster with your phone. People don't realize that, like really high pixels. You see those iPhone billboards and they say shot on iPhone. It's like, yeah, that was shot on iPhone. True. It's true. So, and the thing to keep in mind is this, so it's not necessarily equipment, but understanding how to use it, right? A lot of people don't know the different features within their iPhone to like increase brightness or those kinds of things. But more than anything, I tell people to think about finding the light, finding good light, understanding what good light is. And that's just, you don't even have to study the light. Like when people talk about the angle and it's like, I took a photography class in college, and it just like, it made me not want to use the camera because it was just too much information, f-stops, whatnot, exposures. It was just like, I always say I take pictures. I don't, like, I make pretty pictures is what I do. And I think of that from a perspective of, as an artistic person, I think of composition more than anything. So I find the light, and the light is, when I say find the light, like because I'm not a technical person, I can't tell you where the light is. I can tell you, like, don't go bright, or, like diffuse light, things like that. But really, even if nobody showed you anything, if as a person, to understand, like when you see photos, like look at the photo and what is it about that photo that you like? Did you like that kind of that low light, the moody light? Did you like that kind of the shadows of the bright sunlight coming in? And just play around with your camera, take pictures of things that don't matter around your house, just play around with the phone and figure out where in your house or your business takes good photos. Because there's almost always a magic spot. Totally. I take like 90% of my photos in one spot in my house, and I just make it look different, but it's pretty much always one spot. And like at a restaurant too, there's always like one table by one particular window that the light is always good. You can change the backdrop or whatever, but that's the corner where you take pictures. And this is just using available light. But I say use a composition. I really believe in the rule of thirds. So if you
yes, we go over that a lot. Mm-hmm.
That is so important. If you do nothing else, understand composition and the rule of thirds, and when you take the photo, obviously go a little wider, especially if you're not familiar with how you might be cropping it, just so you have the ability to change the crop.
And then, yeah, you don't want a digital zoom, because that just like, that messes up.
Yeah. And things look different when you start doing stuff like that. So I try to compose in the phone the way that I plan to use the photo, but always, like when I see people do one photo, they go, done, got it. That's it. Like even when I think I got it, I take at least a few more, just so you have options,
Well, you're there, so you might as well, right?
Yeah, while you're there, you don't know, plus things, especially if you're using it for social, it might look differently, the page post. And if you want to use it something different, a variation of it, because you don't want to post the same thing on your stories, you might want to have a slightly different variation. And then the aspect ratio of the stories is much longer. So you want to capture like a photo that in that format looks really good, it drives, and then if you ever plan to like use it on a website or something like that, you're going to want a nice horizontal, which, on Instagram looks kind of most of the time kind of terrible, because you get such a scrunchy little photo. So I say, take lots of different options, play around with your features. I honestly don't use a lot of apps. I get a lot of questions on what apps you use, and I feel like too many people use it as a crutch. There are definitely apps out there that are very helpful, but you should be able to do everything without any app. The apps are a bonus, but if you can't take a decent picture without any apps, then the app ain't going to help you. It's just going to make it a little easier to like balance your whites or
Yes.
That's how I use it. I use it like if you're in a situation where it's really yellow and it's like no fault of your own, there's really no way to take out all that yellow. You can use an app, tone down the yellows, things like that, do your curves, but you have to have a desire, and you have to have a desire to want to use that app and like get to know it, because they can be kind of complicated. And then again, like if you get frustrated, then you're not going to use it at all, and you're not going to take pictures.
Right.
So,
right. I mean, we're learning to use Lightroom Mobile, which is wonderful. But like you said, I mean, within every menu, there's a drop down of sometimes 5, 6, 7 submenus. And so it can be a lot of information. It can be somewhat overwhelming. But the reason I do like it is because, number one, you can set a custom white balance by simply sticking a napkin in your frame and just hit a check, and that will balance your white balance. And then, but if you forget to do that, you can go in editing and you can play around with the different white balance presets like fluorescent, daylight, cloudy. But, you know, even those aren't always accurate. Sometimes for fun, I'll just, if it's cloudy out, and I'll take a picture of, you know, potato salad, and I'll hit the cloudy preset for white balance, and it looks green, you know. So we need to know how to, you know, train our eyes to see that pure white. And the same goes for all those other sliders that you can mess around with. You know, it's,
right.
I think a little goes a long way. So we're just trying to learn the main ones and how to sort of make our photos like, you know, pop a little bit. The other reason I like Lightroom Mobile is because they will overlay the grids onto your screen. So we've got the rule of thirds. There's like the phi grid, which is like the rule of thirds, except the middle column is shrunken a little bit. And then there's a level, which is really helpful. But as you said, you know, it's not always about all those bells and whistles, and you have to have a desire to want to use them too. So, I mean, yeah. I do remember, you know, one time I took a photo, this was way back in like 2010, maybe. It was like the LA Times burger contest. And I made this elaborate burger and I shot a picture of it on my iPhone, and they contacted me and they said, that burger looks incredible, but it's just so yellow. Is there any way that you can, you know, change it? And I literally had no idea how to edit anything. And I said, well, how do you do that? You know, so, but then once I learned that it could be changed, then that got me interested. You know what I mean? So anyway, let's talk about cooking. Can we talk about cooking for a second?
Sure.
Okay. Because I know you're a really good cook. I know that you occasionally will still, if not write recipes, at least style some family recipes. There's one that's going to come out in the summer. I think is it a family recipe for Korean?
Yeah, it's a Korean kalbi recipe. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I also know that you have children living at home. And so let's just pretend for a minute that your children are out of town for, say, a week. What kinds of things would you go in and cook? What do you like to cook?
Well, the thing is, I love to cook, but I actually hate project cooking. And I mentioned it on a recent Instagram post because people always send me projects because they think it's cool. And, oh, what, don't you want to do this? And I'm always like, that sounds like torture. No, you go ahead. You go, girl. Like, go for it, you know? See, the way that I look at it is I got nothing to prove. Like, I can make pretty much anything if I want to. You know, but I definitely believe that there's a reason why restaurants exist and a reason why home cooks exist. And I feel like there are certain things that just, you leave it to the restaurant, you know, or like even bread, there's certain breads. It's like, there's a reason why you get it at the bakery, you know, you could make that at home, but is it worth it? You know, and I certainly get people who want to do it because they want the experience and they want that challenge. My husband's very much like that. He loves to cook and he loves a project. And I'm just like, you do it. Because I have zero interest in it, even though I know how. So like, sometimes he'll have a question, this happened or whatever. How come this isn't happening? I'll just give him an answer. It's too cold. That's why, you know, I already know the answer, but I don't want to do it. And so I feel like my greatest talent is being able to cook on the fly. Like I am most impressed by myself when I can cook a delicious meal with pretty much no ingredients and no time. Like I tell my family, I said, set the table. And they're like, is it we're going to eat? No, you haven't started cooking yet. Set the table. Like by the time that they're done setting the table, dinner will be ready. Like I feel like the ability to cook without a recipe, proper techniques is more impressive than having, like, if you have a solid recipe, there's no excuse really why it shouldn't come out. Obviously there's things that happen, variables and things like that. But for the most part, if you have a solid recipe, this is why I don't often believe in recipes, because most recipes honestly are not that good, or there's too many variables that aren't mentioned in the recipe. Obviously the original recipe creator, or the person who wrote the recipe, in their kitchen and their oven and their stove, their pot, whatever, it works perfect every single time. But most recipes, for the sake of simplicity, because I also write recipes for other people and I've edited recipes, I've done all these recipe testing about all that kind of stuff. There's so many variables that are not mentioned in most recipes, because it would bog down the recipe. So they just leave it to, so there's a certain amount of you leave it up to the person to figure it out. And if you cook enough, you already know these kinds of things. But if you're a total layperson, like it's not spelled out. So anyway, I like to cook things. I always follow a recipe to a T when it's a baking recipe, for sure, because I believe in science. I also know, just looking at a recipe, I understand the science behind a recipe, what ingredients are active ingredients versus ingredients that are just there for flavor. And I also know that this doesn't really matter. 1 onion versus half a cup of chopped onions isn't going to make a difference in this particular recipe, but in this recipe, it will, so yeah, I mean, most of the time I cook whatever people want to eat. My joy is cooking for other people and giving them what they want. My joy is not the process of cooking, although I enjoy it. I enjoy the fact that it is easy for me. So to be able to do something that I think is hard for people, that just comes natural to me, is enjoyable. It's just like you like to do things that you're good at. It's fun to do things that you're naturally good at, right? Because it's easy for you. So I like to be able to cook something that is enjoyable. And then, like, if someone says, oh my gosh, I had this such and such at this one place and they don't make it anymore. Like, and I'm like, tell me about it. Like, tell me what it tasted like. Tell me what it's like. What did it look like? All this stuff. And I will recreate it for them. And they'll be like, it's like somebody woke up from the dead, like that's joyful for me to be able to do that for them, or just make them happy. Like they like certain things, but they want it a particular way. And so I really enjoy cooking for my kids, because if they had their choice, they would always have me cook their food and not go to a restaurant, because the restaurant always makes it differently. And so I know exactly how they want it, and I'm going to be able to present it that way. Or my family has very different food tastes than me. And so during this pandemic has been very boring for me to eat at home.
I know.
I just I just make what they make, and I'm happy to do that. And, I always ate at restaurants, and I traveled to eat for myself. That was for me. But since I can't do that now, it's okay. So I put my energy into making them happy.
That was really a great answer that you just gave me, because, I was kind of going down the road like, well, what's something you'd really love to make? And it's like, no, that's not where you're at. You know what I mean? So, because
that's the thing. Like I tell people, like, there's really no, like, for me, I really don't have anything to prove to myself, because I know that I can do it. So it's like, do I want to make this multi-level French terrine that has all these different layers? But it's like, yeah, but do I want to invest 3 days to do this thing? Like, I already know I can do it. So why do it? Like, the culinary school is great because you learn how to do all these things. And then, hopefully in your practical life, you actually got to practice them more than just in culinary school, which I did get to do, because I worked in kitchens, not just pastry, but in savory. And I executed these things so many times that it's like, it's kind of like off your bucket list, like, done that, know how to do it. If I ever needed to do it again, I could, but I don't need to prove it to anybody that I can. So now my goal is to simplify it, or to show people. So the recipes I usually post on Instagram, I don't really post that many recipes, but I also believe very strongly that I love people to feel empowered to cook, because I don't think it's a difficult thing. And I love to teach people how to cook, and I love to teach people how to cook better, is more than anything. Or teach them some technique skills, or teach them how to cook intuitively, these kinds of things. It's a real joy for me. So usually the recipes that I post on Instagram are what I call kind of like genius recipes, and that you really can't mess them up. There's very few ingredients, and the effort versus the reward is great. So those are the recipes that I personally get most excited about, where it's like little effort, high reward. Because there's a ton of recipes out there. It's high reward, high results. It's like, yeah, but who's got time for that? So I want the recipes that are super simple. You can make them out of your pantry. They take 5 ingredients. They take 20 minutes of your time, and voila, you get this, you know.
Wow.
Those are the impressive recipes. Those are the ones that you need to keep and you need to show your children and they need to show their children, you know. Those are the things, that's the thing that I get excited about. But yeah, I mean, when I talk to people, I say, what do you like to eat? I'll teach you how to make those things, or I'll teach you how to make them better or more efficiently. Like, I'm really keen on efficiency in the kitchen. I see people cooking and making all these dishes and making a mess and using 40 pots. And I was like, most of the things I make is 2 pots, you know, 4 dishes, like 1 cutting board, 1 knife, you know. No mess.
Yes.
And by the time you're done with dinner, you should only have the dishes that you had from what you were eating. There shouldn't be a big pileup of dishes. Otherwise, you're not working efficiently.
Clean as you go.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to touch on a couple other things because you mentioned that you do, and I know because I've seen you so many times, love to dine out. And so I'm sure that you're still feeling a sense of loss or missing that, but hopefully, you know, things are going to start to open up pretty soon, or at least, I mean, obviously not return to the way they were before COVID, but that's got to be on your mental radar in terms of things you're looking forward to, or not necessarily goals. But I was just going to ask you, you know, what is this year? What are you looking forward to this year? What are some projects that you're having fun with, and things like that?
Well, I love dining out, you know, as much as I like cooking. I prefer, if I could, I always say if I was married to a chef, like I would, you know, I would probably never cook. I would be a really good, I always say that I would be a really good prep cook because I actually love to handle ingredients over and over. Like I like to peel like a case of pears. I like to chop like a bunch of something, you know, like I would be a really good prep cook. It's really hard to make a living as that.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I love the methodical nature of like separating 120 egg yolks. Like that is more fun for me than it would be to actually be cooking like on a line, you know.
That's cool.
There's something very meditative and relaxing about that kind of thing.
Yeah,
like, you know,
I can see.
And there's no decisions. It's just like, and I would do it as a personal challenge when I worked in the kitchens, like as pastry chef, people would be talking and cracking eggs and separating. I'd be like, no, don't talk, focus and see how quickly you can do it. Like really, I mean, and not to take the fun out of it, but like for me, it was a personal goal. Like I separate 120 eggs every day. And I would look at the clock and I'd see, okay, I'm going to do it in 8 minutes or whatever. Like I'd set a goal for myself and see if I can do it. And just by not talking and focusing, not daydreaming, but focusing, it's amazing how quick you can do something and how more efficiently you can do things. But yes, back to restaurants. I do miss restaurants, and I miss not just the food. I miss the whole, I was talking to somebody about, I miss the whole presentation about being surprised. Like if I cook something, I know exactly what this is only going to go on so many plates in my house. You know, I only have 1 set of silverware, you know, 1 glassware, whatever, but you go to a restaurant and it's presented and you've never seen it before presented that way. It's comes to your table. It's just a visual delight. And you can eat a lot of different things and you can try different things. And I don't necessarily want to buy a bunch of ingredients for something if I'm not sure if I'm really going to be cooking it regularly. Whereas you can go to a restaurant and it's not just about the food, but to have that experience. It's a one-time experience. And I miss that. And I miss traveling to eat too. That's my favorite pastime, is traveling to eat.
Yeah. Well, nobody's done a ton of that this year or this past.
Yes.
Yeah. And I definitely miss seeing you in restaurants too. So,
I do too. There's all these people that we haven't seen and that, you know, get to eat with, because I have my food friends, which are different than, you know, like my childhood friends that I hang out with, and even my family. I love my family, but we all have different food tastes. And so it's, imagine like like my husband, he's out motorcycle riding today. Like I'm not going to be riding motorcycles with him, you know, but we're obviously together. I have, but I mean, it's not like my idea of like how to spend a fun Friday. So we have different people that we do things with. And I have friends who I just love to eat with, you know, and of course the conversation that comes with it. But it's not even just the eating. It's like their excitement at like trying a new place and their excitement for like ordering the whole menu, you know. It's not like bribing my children to try something new. It's like, no, let's order the whole thing, you know, like that general enthusiasm for that. I miss hanging out with people who have the same enthusiasm for the things that I am enthused about.
Yeah, me too. Well, Judiann, on that note, again, I've missed seeing you around, but I know that I can find you on Instagram and Facebook and your stories and so forth. You've given us a lot of great, great information. I just love your perspective on everything. And so thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sue. So fun to talk to you. And I hope I
Yeah,
get to see you in person soon.
I know. Me too. Me too.